Hidden away in a quiet valley on the northern Gold Coast, a mysterious giant has recently been discovered. While many of Queensland's native tree species have long been documented, named and researched by science, one has long remained a secret. Only a couple of decades ago, a group of amateur botanists stumbled across it. Its glossy leaves and huge bottle-shaped trunk were unlike those of any native plant they'd seen before. Today, still comparatively little is known about this amazing tree. It is so new, in fact, that it doesn't even have a scientific name. But this tree is so treasured by the local community that these Gold Coasters are now working hard to save this incredible species from extinction. This is the story of the Ormeau Bottle-tree.
Hi, I'm Glenn Leaper. I'm from Native Plants, Queensland, and I'm standing on the banks of the Pimpama River in the upper Ormeau Valley, standing underneath this magnificent old Ormeau Bottle-tree. One day in the 1980s, a local resident, Janet Hauser, who was a botanical illustrator and an amateur botanist like myself, we arranged to meet underneath the big tree at the side of the road, which we call the mango tree, as did a lot of the other people in the local district. And then we went up to a patch of scrub just up the road from there. And as we walked, Janet, with her really good botanical knowledge, she found this young bottle tree. And then all of a sudden this little bright spark went off in her brain and she goes, oh, let's go back and have a look at that big tree that we meet underneath down at the road. I think it's a brachychiton, not a mango tree. And sure enough, we went down there and it turned out to be a brachychiton. So from that day on, it became brachychiton species Ormeau. I've got here a young Ormeau bottle-tree. As the Ormeau bottle-tree grows, its foliage changes. Originally it'll have just the one single long narrow leaf, and then it gets 3 lobes, and then it'll get 5 lobes, then 7, then 9 lobes, long finger-like lobes of the leaf. And then it starts to get broader. Each of those lobes start to get bigger and they start to reduce in number. So it'll go back to 7 lobes, but much broader, and 5 lobes, then 3 lobes. And then eventually it ends up just as a simple leaf, and it looks rather remarkably like a mango. The Ormeau bottle-tree not only changes its leaf shape as it grows older and taller, but it also changes its trunk. In the younger years, it has a very smooth green trunk, and as it gets older, the dark grey-brown, chunky, burrowed, fissured trunk starts to develop until you end up with a very distinctive swollen trunk, which gives it the name the Ormeau bottle-tree. The distinctive swollen trunk is very similar to the boab tree over in Western Australia, and it's an adaptation from drier times in the past when these plants adapted to actually store a lot of moisture in their trunk. Farmers recognised this when the cattle were starving and needing some food, so they'd push down the bottle trees for them to graze on. The Indigenous people also used to bore holes into the trunk and would actually be able to extract water that would accumulate in those holes too. So they certainly are large water storage organs, those trunks. In recent years, there's been a very detailed DNA analysis of the Ormeau bottle-tree by the Sunshine Coast University. And they actually discovered that it is a very ancient tree. The Ormeau bottle-tree still doesn't have an official botanical name. And there's a number of reasons for that, and the main reason is it was originally thought to be possibly a hybrid between other species. So the DNA work and other work mapping its distribution in the valley and in adjoining valleys have delayed the naming of this species officially. So in the meantime, it's a tree with no name. When the tree is growing in the natural rainforest here in the valley, amongst other rainforest trees, it can grow up to 35 metres tall. So it's a very large spreading canopy tree. Like all bottle trees and brachychitons, this Ormeau bottle tree has small bell-shaped tubular flowers, green, and there's separate male and female flowers. And they seem to be pollinated by various insects such as bees and beetles. After the flowering and the pollination occurs, then the pods develop. They're a small pod that is initially green, going to brown, going to black. about 5 centimetres long, pointy at both ends and splits down the middle, opens up and reveals rows of small seeds that are covered in irritating little yellow hairs. And those little yellow hairs protect the seeds to a degree from predators such as people like me and maybe birds, because birds like to eat them too and spread them round. Not surprisingly, the Ormeau Bottle-tree is found in the upper Ormeau Valley. It's actually found nowhere else in the world. And because of that, it's actually listed both nationally and in the state as a critically endangered species.
G'day folks, my name's Paul Donahue. I work for Healthy Land and Water, the Natural Resource Management Group for South East Queensland. And today I'm standing in the Darlington Nature Refuge and we're here to look at this amazing brachychiton species Ormeau. A couple of years ago we were really fortunate to get funding to do some survey work in this nature refuge, and we were actually working on this species to see if the original size of the population was still intact. Back in the late 90s there were thought to be about 220 mature individuals of brachychiton species Ormeau, and we were really keen to know 10-20 years down the track whether that was still the case. And wow, the results were absolutely astounding. So we found that the original 220 mature trees were still intact, but in addition to that, we actually found over 500 juvenile brachychiton species Ormeau. So in that period, since the earlier survey work had been done, there had been a massive germination event, and then added another 500 individuals to the actual species record for this plant. But what we found when we were actually doing the survey work was equally interesting. So if you can look at what you're seeing now, this is actually an ecotonal area. We're outside of the dry rainforest component and in a mixture of rainforest species and dry sclerophyll species. And this is where the juvenile brachychitons are germinating. So it's not in the rainforest and not beyond this area, but in a much more drier climate. And that presents a real dilemma for us in terms of the conservation of this species. One of the big issues here is managing fire, whether we allow the rainforest boundary to expand outwards. If we kept fire out of this area, logically that would be what will probably happen. And you can see the evidence of rainforest expansion already around me here, with a few other species that would act as those sort of pioneers that start to push out the rainforest edge. Now that would probably be a good thing in terms of securing the brachychiton juveniles, the juvenile trees that are here around us at the moment. They would have a more secure environment to actually be able to mature, set flower and fruit. But it also means that this type of ecosystem is changing. It's changing from an ecotone to much more of a rainforest system, and it's pushing back the dry sclerophyll elements. And that's a situation that we have to resolve, both in terms of the fire management and whether we want that ecosystem change here occurring in the first place.
Hi, I'm Sue Durance and this is my partner Bob, and we are both members of North East Albert Landcare and Landcare Wildlife. We're currently here today at our property in Kingsholm. Bob and I became fascinated by this unique bottle tree, and we started to look at how to propagate the bottle tree, and then we looked at the whole upper Ormeau Valley and decided that we really needed to engage local landholders, local industry and developers who were starting to move into the valley, making them aware of the significance of the Ormeau bottle tree and how important it is to conserve it for the future.
In addition to fire, one of the major problems that the Ormeau bottle-tree is facing is that of invasive weeds. Some of the weeds in the valley, like molasses grass and exotic glycine vine, have the ability to completely overrun and swamp any bottle trees that do manage to germinate, so they just die. One of the things that we've been trying to do right along the catchment here is to control invasive weeds. We've done that in conjunction with private landholders. We've done it as a group ourselves, and we've also been lucky enough to get some funding here and there over the years that's helped a lot with being able to get contractors in to do some weed control in strategic areas to protect the bottle tree.
So one of the aims of North East Albert Landcare from the beginning has been to have a continuous biodiversity and wildlife corridor running from the northern Darlington Range through to Moreton Bay. The Gold Coast City Council has purchased several large parcels of land for conservation. The main problem we see for the future is further fragmentation due to the increased development of housing in the area. So we've got several large housing developments in the middle catchment, and potentially these could cause more fragmentation of the Pimpama River ecosystem. So definitely an area of concern for the future.
Hi, I'm Elkie Staff, Stakeholder Relations Manager for Boral. Today we are standing at the Boral Environmental Reserve, around 3 hectares of quarry buffer land made available by Boral for the local community and for conservation. Almost 3 decades ago, Boral engaged with local stakeholders, forming the Pimpama River Revegetation Partnership in collaboration with City of Gold Coast Council and North East Albert Landcare Group. This partnership helps support the Ormeau Bottle-tree project that is protecting this rare species of tree. There are many actions taken by Boral to protect the bottle tree. We estimate to have planted about 100,000 native trees of a variety of rainforest species over the years. This work has improved the habitat of the Ormeau bottle-tree by restoring rainforest and keeping down weeds around existing bottle trees and reinstating many additional trees through plantings, ensuring that all natural and planted specimens are retained and protected as part of Boral's ongoing operations. And another example of how we protected the bottle tree is during the redesign of our new quarry entry, which sought to avoid a single sapling of the bottle tree that was identified during the design process. Those redesign costs alone were more than $50,000.
Hi, I'm Liam Ellsworth, manager of the Boral Ormeau Quarry. I've been looking after this site for the past 8 years. Boral is a public company and we have a responsibility to our shareholders who increasingly demand companies to focus on the environment and on sustainability measures. In this light, Boral takes their partnership commitments seriously and continues to work with Landcare on improving and advancing a riparian zone along the upper reaches of the Pimpama River, spanning over 6 kilometres, which over the years has shown clear improvements in health and is now an important wildlife corridor. Unfortunately, to this day, the area suffers from trespassing by 4-wheel drivers, causing environmental damage such as erosion along the creek and threatening the habitat of the Ormeau bottle-tree. Boral and other neighbours have been working together to keep trespassers out through fencing and erecting bollards, gates and signs.
Boral's hope for the future of the Ormeau bottle-tree is to continue to support Landcare in their conservation work, aiming to ensure the survival of this amazing species.
I'm Professor Catherine Pickering from Griffith University on the Gold Coast, and here I am in the beautiful Gold Coast Regional Botanical Gardens. We're losing lots and lots of plants, sadly, in Australia. All sorts of things are threatening them. And one of the things that's really important is to conserve them in the wild, but also to conserve them out of the wild, ex situ conservation. And there are lots of places that can happen, including in places like this, Regional Botanical Gardens. Ex situ conservation protects species. Where they are in the wild, there are various threats to them. But when we bring them into other places, it's like an insurance policy. It's a way of us just keeping them safe. And that can be for living trees, such as here around us in the Regional Botanical Gardens on the Gold Coast, the trees we've got on the Gold Coast campus of Griffith University, and around other cities. But also in the form of seeds stored in these really important seed vaults. There's famous ones in Norway, in Kew Gardens. We've also got ones at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney. So this is how we can keep the species safe for the long term. It's really important to teach about conservation, to teach the public via these botanic gardens, via films like this one. And it's really important also to train scientists in conservation, where they're going to go on to do further research to conserve the species and understand the threats, but also as practical environmental scientists, going out there mapping where the species are, working with councils, working with land developers, working with national parks, the whole lot. We need those experts, and at Griffith we're really excited to be able to teach the next generation of scientists.
Hi, I'm Kate Heffernan, founder of the Friends of Gold Coast Regional Botanic Gardens and Botanic Gardens consultant. I became involved with the Botanic Gardens because I'm absolutely passionate about our region's flora and wanted to see it brought out into the community's site. So here at these regional botanic gardens, we're able to bring people here who enjoy the environment, but also have the opportunity to learn about some of the incredible endangered species that we have in our area. One of the really important plants on our endangered plant trail that people can wander around and look at signs and learn from is the Ormeau Bottle-tree. We were really privileged to be the receivers of an Ormeau Bottle-tree that was a rescue plant from a development site on the northern part of the Gold Coast. It's grown into a really big monster of a tree. It's already started to flower and hopefully one day soon it will fruit, and that will help its reintroduction to the wild. One of my happiest roles here is to actually train our volunteer guides. And you know, the reaction we have from the community and visitors from interstate or other parts of Queensland when we introduce them to our endangered plants and they understand just how threatened plants are in our natural environment. It's a real eye-opening moment for those people, and you can see the lights come on really, and they go away convinced that we all have to protect our lovely biodiversity.
Being a critically endangered plant and numbers being very low, all of these impacts upon the population of the Ormeau Bottle-tree can have a serious effect upon its sustainable population, how it will survive into the future. Every loss, every plant that disappears, every plant that gets burnt, every tree that gets pushed over by a four-wheel drive, every little seedling that gets covered by weeds, that has an impact upon this very small population. And it has an impact upon the genetic diversity of this species within the valley. For a sustainable population, for a robust population to survive into the future, we need that genetic diversity. So therefore, we really need to hang on to all these specimens of the Ormeau Bottle-tree that we've got. It's an emblematic species of this rainforest environment in Ormeau. It's one of many significant species in the Ormeau Valley. And because it's such an important species, it plays a really important role for people to be able to enjoy and understand these rainforests. We have a number of other species that are almost as rare as the Ormeau Bottle-tree. And I'd like to think that this species will be able to capture everyone's imagination and be able to lead to some really good conservation outcomes so that my grandkids, their grandkids, will be able to enjoy these rainforests at Ormeau and also be able to stand underneath this magnificent tree in the future.